virtualization, VMware. These have become almost synonymous terms, or certainly interchangeable. Virtual machines have become the building blocks of modern IT systems. And with VMware present in over 90% of our data centers, there's a high chance that you have, well, some VMware infrastructure somewhere, which may or may not require attention. You see, Broadcom's recent acquisition has already led to concerns about licensing, product support, and a whole bunch of other issues, or potential issues. VMware, as we know it, has been fundamentally altered. And these changes are significant and they require careful consideration, no matter whether you see them as positive or negative. Customers seeking to mitigate the impact of these changes often jump to migration as being some type of a quick answer. Well, migration is a serious endeavor that will look different for every customer, plus there's a lot of preparation and analysis required before that should even be considered. Case in point, Worldwide Technology would say that you should reassess your virtualization strategy. This advice can be found within the research paper Data Center Priorities for 2024. These include pay down technical debt, cyber recovery, which we covered in a recent show that you can watch already, and AI investments here at Priority 3, and then we'll jump down to 5 for staffing issues, which remain important. Wish this one was new. But Priority 4, that's our focus for this episode, reassess virtualization strategy. Or put another way, what do we do, if anything, about VMware? By Broadcom. These changes are big enough to warrant some kind of formal attention. And we're joined by two WWT experts who live and breathe virtualization. From Englewood, Colorado, you're going to meet Jeff Mercier. And from Omaha, Nebraska, we have James Harless. Two principal solutions architects who have been actively engaging with customers, addressing their queries and developing action plans for what they came up with. You know, at one level, it doesn't seem like this should be all that difficult. And it really doesn't have to be, but I'm surprised at the nuance involved here, and I'm thankful that we have experts like this to rely on. My name is Rob Boyd. You've got questions. Heck, we've all got questions. Let's look for some answers. Welcome to WWT Research. Well, gentlemen, welcome to Worldwide Technology Research. Just as a quick background, because I've worked with you guys before at different degrees, but let's start. Jeff, we'll start with you. What is your background and what makes you so passionate about today's topic?
Yeah, so I've been at Worldwide for almost 8 years now. And my background, while I've been at Worldwide and even a little bit before, is a lot of virtualization background, a lot of storage background. But when I came to Worldwide, I got focused on hyperconverged infrastructure. And then in the last 2 years, there's been a major shift in the industry, and I've been more or less focused on what hypervisor alternatives. And the biggest reason for that, to be honest, is because Nutanix leads a lot of those discussions, and I was brought in because of the hyperconverged background, where they also are a major place. So that's kind of where I fit into this picture.
Excellent, excellent. James, I'll have the same question to you.
Yeah. So thanks, James Harless. So I have been with Worldwide about 5 years now, and for most of my career, I've been focused on virtualization. I really kind of emphasize architecture in the virtualization space. So for the last few years at WWT, I've been a software-defined data center, really focusing on VMware Cloud Foundation and the solutions in that portfolio. And so, yeah, this change, as Jeff mentioned, with Broadcom has brought a lot of consternation to our customers, and you know, we're pretty excited about what are the possibilities here and what can be done.
How did we get to this spot? VMware, the acquisition was announced back in 2022. Our industry has a lot of acquisitions. Why did this one cause any more consternation or anxiety on your customer base?
So I think there's a little bit of history here to be understood. So VMware's had a very dominant position in the virtualization space. I think they own more than 80% of the market in general. They own, and it's not just the number of virtual machines that are installed, it's the number of people that work on VMware virtualization platforms. But over the last, decade or so, there's been this transition towards public cloud. And so a lot of VMware's mind share has been kind of declining. So we've kind of seen them as maybe a legacy approach in some environments where they're more emphasizing the cloud. So Broadcom kind of saw an opportunity here to, come in and say, hey, we're going to take over and kind of make a stake here. This is where VMware plays well. We're going to shore up this part of their business, and this will kind of be the go forward strategy for VMware in this market.
Well, it's interesting because I think Broadcom had reached out to them. Part of this is part of their getting better at cloud kind of philosophy and multi-cloud. Because despite VMware maybe seeming like a company that's long in the tooth, I would say they're extreme. They've built an entire industry and they have the market share to reflect that type of ownership. So I just imagine any kind of acquisition of something where everybody's built their career on since, they've constructed this industry, it's got to cause some issues. I don't know. Jeff, you have any comments on it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I said before in the introduction, both James and I have a virtualization and specifically VMware background. So there's
Case
a
in point.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so we even ourselves had to take a look at this acquisition and say, what do we do? How do we address this? And knowing that it's not only affecting us, but literally every single one of our customers. It was a major shift that we had to really get ahead of very quickly. And I think a lot of the heartburn for how the acquisition has gone down is not so much like what may be happening today, which there's definitely some of that, but it's more of how the acquisitions from previous companies have happened with Broadcom, and we're not to go into that history, but that's what kind of kickstarted a lot of these conversations. Is, hey, we know what they've done in the past and what that run book looks like. Do you believe this is something that could happen with VMware once the acquisition does go through? And how do we address and how do we reduce risk, or what is it that we should do, if anything?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. This topic reminds me of one of those old adages about focusing on things you can control versus just things you're aware of. James, how do you look at providing advice to customers? What are they coming to you with question-wise? The acquisition officially closed not that long ago as of now, and we've seen some changes, but what kind of questions are you getting from customers that have to be addressed that give you a gauge of how they're feeling?
Yeah, so I really like that question. So they kind of come in different buckets, right? There's people who are coming in saying, hey, I don't understand all the changes to the licensing. I don't get it. Like this is a new set of offerings. What does this look like? Because VMware dramatically simplified, or Broadcom dramatically simplified what that portfolio looks like to drive more value out of the customers that they have. And then we have other customers who are saying, my reaction is, I hate this, right? I think that this is going to be more expensive. I want to do something dramatic. And to your point about control the things that I, am able to, I think it's control the things that I should control. Like we got to be careful with those knee-jerk reactions and how that plays out.
Well, and when it comes to our options for this, it feels like at one level, or maybe at the first degree, the question becomes, if I'm thinking of a flow chart breaking this down, it becomes, do I stay or do I go? Is that the right way to first look at it? And then what are the implications? Let's stick with just stay, if that's correct. What does that imply? What does that look like, knowing what we know?
More or less, yes. It's should I stay or should I go? There's definitely something in between there of I can have both. When customers come to us and they have the initial reaction of, this is expensive, I don't like it, let's get off of VMware. It's really important that we dig into what the actual business requirements are behind those comments, because if the leading reason is, this is too expensive, I want to get off of VMware now, whatever the reasons may be, that's not a good enough reason, because it is more expensive to move off of VMware than it would be to just stay on and adopt what that Broadcom vision is of the VMware portfolio moving forward.
This was a calculus that was well understood during the acquisition. So, customers just need to think about this carefully, what their real objectives are, what they are not. And it might perfectly be valid to stay on VMware and optimize what that footprint looks like, wring more value out of that increasing spend.
I understand diversification, and that's one of the options in terms of decreasing your maybe commitment to VMware so that you have a little bit of variety. We'll talk about what that involves in a moment. But even if you think you may stay the course, you're saying you need to reevaluate, what does it look like, almost like you were buying something new. If you were to do this again today, knowing exactly what you know now, is this still the infrastructure you would want based on exactly what you know the cost, your application volume and all that type of stuff. And so we begin to diversify. Is that a good thing to go into in terms of what that would look like? That would mean other virtualization options, correct?
I think what we're talking about here with the idea that we can do both is it might make sense to move some of our footprint off of VMware onto another hypervisor platform, onto some other strategy, maybe something that's not going to be severely impacted by some capability that VMware delivers, mostly to diversify our strategy and to kind of shore us up from this kind of exposure in the future, because this has clearly shook some companies pretty deeply, and it's centered on the idea that, hey, we had all of our eggs in this one basket.
We have a hypervisor at the core of the data center, and that's been that single vendor strategy. We have more or less operated that way without a second thought being given to, what kind of risk could that introduce to my data center? And now that has come to light. And the reason why this is important to understand is a lot of our customers have done a dual vendor strategy everywhere else in the data center, whether that be in the storage form, whether that be in the x86 compute form, whether that be in the networking form. We've had a lot of those dual vendor strategies, but we never really thought about the hypervisor. It was there, it ran great, and there was really nothing else on the market, which kind of leads into your question around, well, what is out there, and what kind of feature functions might I give up if I adopt this technology? And that's definitely a part of the journey. One of the biggest things that we're telling customers is, just because you've had this requirement, you've had this feature functionality with VMware, does that actually mean that you need it? And use this opportunity to potentially re-architect the data center to what you might feel it should look like, versus trying to have a mirror copy with a different technology as you move, down this journey, or as you move down the architecture route.
Great point. Is there certain low-hanging fruit that's obvious from an external perspective? Because I know everybody's story is going to be different, that says, oh, these type of applications, or this, or stay away from the x86 stuff, or whatever it may be, may lend itself better than others? Or is it really dependent on the unique situation a company finds itself in?
Yeah, so probably both. The last thing you want to do is introduce a major change to your core of the data center, or introduce a secondary core of your data center, and put your most business critical applications on top of that. So yeah, there's absolutely low hanging fruit that probably should be started with, the general virtualization population, but probably shouldn't start directly with things that are customer facing, or database stuff, things that when something happens, people feel the pain.
And I would add on to that what you're trying to do is you're trying to develop this operational history with this new platform that you may have with VMware over the last 15 years, but now you need to start something new. So yeah, start in the corner, start with something just like you did with VMware. You started in your test dev environments, you started with your low hanging fruit, as it were. Build something like that on the new platform, get that operational experience, understand what it can and can't do, and now's the time to start that effort.
Because VMware has such a huge market share, a lot of third-party applications came to market supporting VMware. Now, a lot of times it's an irrelevant conversations, but there are absolutely applications out there that if you move that virtual machine from VMware to other technology, it invalidates the support agreement. So understanding that application level and saying, is this supported on non-VMware, is also really important to understand, so that you don't get stuck in that situation.
What all do we need to understand that maybe we haven't discussed about what this entails and how important this is, why it's a big deal?
So I think the big thing under the covers is really the way Broadcom is looking at the data center and saying, hey, we are going to kind of repackage these offerings, and we're going to offer our customers something more akin to a private cloud than what VMware did in the past. And so in the past, VMware offered all these a la carte options and kind of left it up to the customer to piece part it together. Broadcom's come along and said, you know what, that's really just not competitive with the public cloud. So if we're going to maintain this position and we're going to stay strong in the data center, we're going to have to put together a solid foundation, and that is the offering that we're going to sell to customers. And this is a dramatic change. A lot of customers just aren't thinking like that, and that they're not ready for it, or they don't want it. But that is what Broadcom's doing with VMware. And so this changes the cost paradigm around that virtualization layer, and it changes the thought process around how we build these environments and how we architect our data centers.
What are the options beyond staying with the hypervisor? Is that, because if you start over today, some people would say, hey, it's a container world going forward. But is that a reality? And is that really the only other option? What are the other options we're looking at in addition to just other hypervisors, non-VMware?
So Jeff and I have thought about this for a long time, and we've kind of come to the idea that there's a potential for a paradigm shift, just like the public cloud represents a paradigm shift for companies, and that's a paradigm. You can pursue that strategy if you are okay with moving your VMware workloads into the public cloud or onto their on-prem versions of those public cloud offerings. But there's also a paradigm shift in how we manage infrastructure going forward. So we have this paradigm around how hypervisors work today and how we manage them. And it's a very established concept, right? We really understand this. We have a lot of really good resources to help guide us in this kind of path, right? But on the other hand, we have Kubernetes, right, which has traditionally been sitting on top of our hypervisors, but there's the possibility that we could run the hosts themselves as Kubernetes nodes and then bring those paradigms of Kubernetes management down into the bare infrastructure. And this enables things like infrastructure as code and GitOps. And the big outcome here is it means that we would be managing our virtual machines and our containers in the same fashion. So if the future is containers, and if we're going to have 10 times as many containers as we have virtual machines somewhere in the future, this might be a very sensible change to make.
What are the benefits? Because that's quite a learning curve, isn't it? Using Kubernetes to manage even your virtual machines. Do the benefits outweigh the extra mental transition cost there?
Do you want to comment on this, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, there's the I have pain now, let's try to fix it with a virtual machine like strategy. And there's I have pain now, but I understand that if I don't shift in the long-term vision, that pain is going to potentially stick around for a really long time. So having that shift to a Kubernetes engine or container engine, it's a total cost of ownership, ROI, whatever you want to call it, but it's more of a long-term vision to go down this route and making sure that you are doing it right. At the end of the day, we do see that, and you made this comment leading into this, that containers is the way of the future. Now, you're going to have your virtual machines running as virtual machines. Perhaps they will be good candidates in the future to containerize and move into that, cloud native format. But that doesn't mean it's going to address it. So in 5 years from now, what could happen is you've shifted hypothetically 1,000 virtual machines into this container engine strategy, but you've shifted 500 of them to be actually cloud native, and you still have some legacy virtual machines that sit around. You don't have to have dual strategies at that point of I have 2 DR plans, I have 2 backup plans, I have 2 of everything, just to manage a smaller subset of my virtual machines or whatever is left over.
So by putting them into that environment, you're saying it can consolidate a lot of the extraneous activities that may be unnecessarily duplicated.
Yeah, assuming that you have that vision of I want to be a
assuming you're doing it that
way.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that this is one of those rare opportunities where something is pushing on us to make a change, right? Or at least reevaluate our position. And so this is a really good opportunity to stop and look at it, because as bad as it might be financially today to make a change towards something that's a long-term plan, it's not going to get easier 5 years from now. In fact, this licensing change, if assuming it's more costly for the organization, they're just going to pay that cost for the next 5 years and then make the change. So it doesn't really, doesn't really make a lot of sense if you need to make that change eventually.
But with containers, it's also not that simple. I guess, is it considered an intermediary step to say, let's manage in a Kubernetes environment, but leave the virtual machine intact? Does that become an intermediary step so you don't have so many things you're having to learn and do all at once? Because refactoring the application could be a completely different mess that may be necessary down the road and probably should be eventually, but maybe not now.
I think that not all virtual machines are going to get refactored to containers. It's just not going to make sense in every case. And in fact, it's the opposite outcome that you want in some cases. So we're going to need to manage some number of virtual machines in the long run. I think where the debate is what is the ratio between containers and virtual machines? Because right now we have, organizations with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of virtual machines, but our container footprints are comparably small. But over time, that's likely to shift, and we're likely to see, that balance flip the other way. And then it becomes hey, are we spending a lot of resources to manage a small number of virtual machines versus this large number of containers we have?
Well, it's not one-to-one though either, right? A container doesn't equal a virtual machine in the terms of the way they operate. And so I also feel like it's really hard to make those comparisons because it is a completely different paradigm in terms of how you run these. What else is important to understand about these other options? And I want to be cognizant of the fact that some of our pre-discussions, you guys were careful about, hey, this starts to bleed into application development questions, which you guys are equipped to answer through other people in WWT. And other infrastructure specialists, perhaps with different backgrounds. But just let's stick within your knowledge.
Two things. Number one, which we kind of touched on when we talked about the container engine and going down the Kubernetes route, which is maybe not as much of an uplift if you stay down the virtual machine first strategy. But it's important to understand that there's going to be training to either your existing administrative staff to adopt a new technology. And we're not talking about, how a certain storage platform does snapshots over the other. We're really talking about the core of the data center, which is the hypervisor, or in the instance of containers, a major learning curve of understanding Kubernetes before you go down this route, making sure that you get ahead of it and that you're not architecting yourself into a corner or painting yourself into a corner. So the training is one, which is also on top of your day-to-day. VMware doesn't magically go away tomorrow. You still have to maintain and manage and patch and do all the things that you've done in the past, plus learn a new technology, which oftentimes falls into, well, where can I go and hire the talent that's going to help me manage this new vision, this new direction that we're going to take our data center, whether that be in the virtual machine first or container. And now you have all these different companies that want to go down this route, which makes the talent acquisition of somebody who understands how to architect and design and manage these technologies at scale really, really important and very valuable resources to go find in the market. So that while we talk about technology and we talk about things and documentation processes that we may have to rewrite as we introduce this new technology, the people is going to be one of the biggest things that will get overlooked and should be one of the biggest focuses on making sure that we actually address upfront.
And I want to add on to just a small point to add on there. And don't think about just the team that supports VMware, because that's obviously they have the most invested here, but the network team has learned to work with that team. The backup team has learned to work with the team. All of these other teams have learned to integrate and work with that team, and they have some kind of idea of how the VMware platform works and how they interact with it. And it just ripples throughout the organization. So if you introduce something new, we have to go to the effort to, get those other teams onboarded onto the solution. Because I can remember, a decade or more ago when we used to go to the networking team and explain to them how this worked. How come we have a virtual machine sitting on top of this hypervisor, more than one? We have multiple IP addresses behind this single port. All of this kind of concept and how they interact with these other platforms are going to need to be readdressed.
It's fun to listen to this and try to decide, okay, where do I need, if I'm an individual listening to this, because we speak in terms of what the organization needs to do, but it seems like there's some obvious calls for where you should focus your training. Do you recommend, is it a clear call to say, hey, if you haven't already dove into understanding Kubernetes or containers, that you should be doing that regardless of where maybe your company that you work for currently is going? What kind of changes do you recommend for individuals staying on top of this?
Go ahead, James.
Okay. I think we're both going to have opinions here. I think that it's important to say up front that I don't think VMware admins are going to go out of style anytime soon. I think that you have a long future. It's just that they might not have the influx of VMware administrators that we used to. We're not going to have this pipeline of people coming up behind them. I think the younger pipeline are going to be focused on some of these other hypervisors that are based on KVM. We got a number of different partners that we work with. I don't know if we can mention partners on here.
Yeah, no, you can mention. No, we're not making judgment calls on partners. These are partners you work with.
Nutanix is a great offering. They've got a really solid solution. So there's going to be a lot of up and coming solutions that are going to be coming after this market space. They're going to be looking for that, split that dual vendor strategy with VMware, or just, completely subsume the resources if a customer is looking to displace Broadcom from their data center. But like you said, we're also going to have people focusing on Kubernetes and KubeVirt. And I think it's still to be seen whether KubeVirt actually makes a dent in this, or we decide, hey, that was a bad path. We're just going to use Kubernetes on top of KVM, Nutanix, or something like that. I think it's still yet to be shaken out. I don't think I would tell somebody, stop what you're doing in VMware, though, and immediately learn Kubernetes. Maybe, but that would probably depend if you had a short-term strategy to go to platform engineering.
Well, you mentioned KubeVirt, and just for anyone that may not be familiar with it, in a general sense, KubeVirt represents an effort to run virtual machines in Kubernetes services environment, correct? But you're still doing virtual machines.
It does. I just want to mention that there's a common misconception about KubeVirt. People imagine, hey, this is like Nutanix, or this is like VMware. It's nothing like those platforms. So it is very different. The idea of KubeVirt is really to support virtual machines in the context of a mostly containerized environment. And so the emphasis is on how containers work and how we support those and we also happen to support virtual machines. And that's a very dramatic change from, VMware, where it was 100% about virtual machines and how we manage those.
Yeah. Jeff, we started this conversation asking about any personal changes, and James said you may not fully agree with his angle on where people should be positioned. You don't have to come up with something contrary, but what is your position on people, career choices in light of this information?
Yeah, my comments are not contrary because he already addressed it. VMware is not going away. The idea of a virtual machine is not going away anytime soon. That vision, or the road leading to pure containers, is extremely long. But I would echo something that one of my customers said, some time ago, that said, coming out of college, a lot of these new folks that are looking to get into IT, they don't understand infrastructure. Yeah. They don't want to understand infrastructure. And so I think even if you kind of take that mindset.
How do you get into IT without understanding infrastructure, though? Do you mind telling me that?
Well, that's
or at least I know that's the problem. But what do you suppose is happening?
Well, it's the public cloud. So if you think of that model in conjunction with that Kubernetes first or container engine first strategy, it makes a lot of sense for customers to really start thinking about, do I really want to go down this route, because it could future-proof me for talent acquisition in the future as new applications come out and they're more containerized than virtual machines. So absolutely, listen, VMware's not going away. Virtual machines are not going away. But public cloud is absolutely an option in all of this, which we really haven't touched on, but is also important to understand.
If I could refine where we are, I think Jeff is really focused on, people will probably be more successful with a replacement hypervisor, right? Or a dual vendor strategy. You're going to have less failures in migration on that side, Jeff. Is that fair if I say that?
Yeah.
And where my thought is, you really should be thinking about 5 or 10 years down the road. And we should use this moment in time to look forward and make the hard decisions now about KubeVirt. And it probably looks like Kubernetes 10 years from now. And I kind of got out of my lane when I was explaining it before.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, is that, we're talking about, you can go down this route, you can go down that route, you can go down all the routes.
That's true.
Yeah. You may have 2 hypervisors that manage virtual machines, and you're going to go down the Kubernetes route, and you're going to keep going down the public cloud route. That's totally fine. The overall message is, understand what you're doing, understand what the future looks like, and potentially put more effort and resources towards what you envision that future to be. Doesn't matter what it is, we can help you make that decision based on the requirements that you tell us.
Yeah, as long as your strategy is not that we're going to stop using VMware because we're going to save money. that's probably not the way that's going to
Yeah.
You just said that it just doesn't work. Once you run the math, that goes out the door quickly.
Yeah, it has to be, I'm going to invest in here because I'm trying to get some other outcome.
Yeah, and keep in mind, our customers have made hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in infrastructure and hardware, and the solution you may think is the best for you doesn't necessarily mean we can reuse any of that. And you're still going to have to buy those licenses for the software that you decide to. So even if you can reuse the hardware, you're still buying licenses from somebody somewhere. So that cost is break even or plus.
But I love your point you said earlier about this is also driving, because it makes complete sense. I just didn't think about it. It's driving investment from other hypervisor players, as well as the alternatives that we've discussed. But before we get away from and close this out, though, you mentioned public cloud. I just want to make sure I didn't get away from that. Is public cloud a realistic option for someone wanting to lower their VMware exposure and Broadcom exposure in this situation? But is it that simple, or is there more involved with when we think about public cloud? James, you're nodding.
So I have this long-standing kind of position about public cloud so to me personally, and I know that I am an outlier on this, so that might sound like a crazy conspiracy nut right here. I don't see how putting all your stuff in the public cloud reduces your risk of exposure here, right? You're just going from a difficult situation to a much more difficult situation. But
you don't see it as well, which makes it feel better.
You see those monthly bills. So I think customers will do it, though. They might already be part ways into that strategy. They might be very happy with what they're getting from there. But I think if the goal is, hey, we don't trust Broadcom, this is not a very good strategy. If the goal is, well, we were already going there, we like a lot of things in there, we're just going to accelerate that, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a very good reason to press forward.
Do you fear that there's customers who will start to realize just how much work that we're recommending should be done for this, and then just go, just throw it in the cloud? Do you see that kind of thing happening at different levels, or do you think people are smart enough not to be that bland about it?
Yeah. So again, to kind of understand what we're being asked here is we've built a data center around VMware for the past 20 plus years. There's an intricate web of things that have been built around that technology. To say I'm going to introduce something else has its own challenges. To go to the cloud, there may be some easier pain points that you can address up there, but to James's point, it's not the answer to I hate VMware, let's move off because I don't actually have a public cloud strategy. It's just, well, I can check this box because I need that service. Yeah, that's fine, but that's not going to long term actually reduce your cost or complexity.
Yeah, it's just different pain.
Yeah,
right. It's just putting your pain in a different place. It makes me wonder when you say, understanding where your pain's at. It strikes me that maybe your pain is that you just don't like IT, and that part is not going to be fixed by any of these options. And so you just need to get out of the industry. I don't think that's our audience, obviously, but it was funny to think about that. I'm like, you're adopting some level of problems, but that is the nature of our business, right? Which is managing through these things. And hopefully helping people think through the long-term implications. Speaking of which, what can WWT do to help either at I have no idea what we're doing, this is new to me, I want to assess our exposure here, to we know we need to do something, can you help us execute?
And customers, like you said, are from I don't even know why I'm freaking out all the way to I'm ready to make a purchase. So there's a bunch of steps in the middle that need to happen, or more than likely need to happen, anywhere from let's educate you on what we're seeing, what our other customers are seeing and doing, get those business reasons in place to make that decision. Let's gather your requirements, maybe even challenge you a little bit as to why you think those are requirements so that we can navigate the space. And a lot of that comes down to, is there a VMware apples to apples out there? No, there isn't. So we're probably going to have to make some concessions somewhere, all the way to getting into our advanced technology center, doing some proof of concepts, testing out the technology, trying to understand what it looks like. And the part where our ATC will really bring a lot of value is not so much come and test this feature function on hypervisor XYZ. It's going to be how do the ancillary products connect into that hypervisor, whether you're using some backup software, Cohesity, Rubrik, Commvault, how does that interact with that new hypervisor or strategy? And then move into all right, we understand what this might look like. What does an architecture look like at scale? Keyword. And then even taking it potentially a step further around, well, I'm going to use this as my opportunity to re-architect things. And maybe I want to automate as much out of the box as possible, where I plug in the server and a process kicks off somewhere to automate the deployment of that cluster. There's customers all over the place on this, on where they want to, whether they just, I'm going to do that later, or yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's slow down the speed up in the future. And then, of course, one thing that we haven't talked about is, well, great, we've only evaluated the technology. How do we actually start doing the migrations of these things? It's a huge piece of this. It's the last thing that you probably want to start thinking about, but don't overlook it. And along the way, everything that I've just said, WWT's got resources to help our customers understand what that landscape is and how to get to that end goal.
And I'll just add on there that Jeff has a briefing published to the platform that account teams or customers can request that will really start this process. And he'll kick that off with them. He'll work closely with them, understand their environment, understand what they're trying to accomplish, help them pare down their outcomes to something that's achievable. And then he can funnel them further into WWT and on into other environments and stuff.
Do any customers ever come to you guys? And can you provide help with, let's say that I realize in my company that I need to do something about this problem, but it's going to take investment and attention that are beyond my purview. I need to sell other people on the importance of this. Do you help put that data together and make the case for doing what needs to be done?
Yeah, so everything that I talked about is more or less setting the strategy, helping customers navigate the space. And then somewhere in between, somebody actually has to execute on the strategy. And that execution of strategy is, like you said, is going to cost money. But we absolutely have a team who can take any type of financial data that you can throw at them and model it out to show you what it could look like in the future, which can actually make you rethink how we got to this point. To get a technology decision is one piece, but to understand the financial implications behind that, you might actually peel back a little bit and say, well, maybe we won't do 50% of our environment in some other hypervisor. Maybe we'll just do 20. And this is really important to understand is while we may have talked about a lot of the challenges that you may run into in this journey, don't take this conversation as this can't be done. You're stuck with VMware. You can do this. Like, we can actually get off or partially get off of VMware and make it make sense for your business and your business requirements. It's going to be challenging, but anything good is not easy. So absolutely, let's not take this as all negative. It can be done.
Jeff, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure talking, and these discussions are awesome to have. So looking forward to anybody who's listening to come in and talk to us.
Absolutely. James, thank you as well.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for spending your time with us this afternoon.
If you're looking for a deep dive into your specific situation, Worldwide Technology's got you covered with a briefing, or specifically a virtualization strategy briefing. This is a free session with a WWT subject matter expert or experts that you can do this remotely or face-to-face, and it's perfect for technical decision makers who want to chat about their virtualization strategies. You're going to learn about what's hot in the industry, the benefits for your specific business, and the solutions that make sense for you amidst the current vendor scene. Also, don't forget to review the entire Data Center Priorities for 2024 report. There are links for everything to be found here at the bottom. My name is Rob Boyd. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.